Police of Reddit, what is the absolute worst crime scene you've come across? I have two, but both not crime scenes. First, decapitated body in a one vehicle RTC in Concert, Durham, England. Crashed into a stone wall and overturned, somehow decapitating the driver. Second was a sudden death. In a flat, the occupants in the downstairs flat complained of a leaking drain from upstairs. It turned out the person upstairs had died, rolled out of bed, and was decomposing on the floor. The leak was the various body fluids from the deceased. Private security here was patrolling the exterior of my building when I smelled it. Once you smell death, you never forget it. What's worse, it was coming from the trash compactor. We have a couple nice restaurants who toss their garbage into the compactor, and a lot of homeless nearby. One of them saw the cooks tossing the garbage the night before and climbed in to grab it. However, the compactor is one of those that will activate when the door closes. Either he didn't know that, or the wind got the door. Holy crap, the thought of being in that situation, seeing the compactor come down knowing you're about to be crushed. My dad was a cop and the worst case he ever had was while he was a detective. They caught a local teacher with something 8 full CDs of CP. The most awful thing about it that you have to go through it all to see if you can identify any adults in the pictures to try and get them busted. Freaking sick. And if a child is identified, the parents and child have to go through every photo and confirm it. It's horrible. A friend of mine's dad is a cop. He told the story of one time he was called to investigate a fire that was lit in an alleyway. This was midday. He'd yet to eat lunch and had skipped breakfast, and upon arriving to the scene noticed a particularly appetizing aroma coming from the fire. His mouth was involuntarily watering. Turns out, the fire was an ignited carpet, rolled up, with a dead person inside of it. I'm not a cop, but a good friend of mine is, and he recently told me a story. A few weeks ago he got a call to a homicide. A 25-year-old male had killed a 63-year-old male. The victim was a father to a 17-year-old high school girl. The girl had recently began dating a known thug drug dealer. The girl's parents had tried to tell her she couldn't date him, but she did it anyways as an act of rebellion. Long story short, the guy stabbed the father about 30 times with a chef's knife found in the owner's kitchen after an argument ensued. The argument was over him not dating his daughter. Looks like dad was right. When my buddy, the cop, showed up, he said the whole kitchen was literally covered in the man's blood. He said the corpse looked like a sliced cow carcass. Both the girl and her mother were sitting in their husband's blood crying hysterically. And this, kids, is why you listen to your parents. My stepfather worked traffic homicide for years and encountered any number of frankly gruesome things, but the story I remember really sticking out in my mind involved a car hitting an electric pole on a rainy night. The car's occupant had, in the course of the accident, become decapitated, had sheared completely off. The electric pole was severely damaged, one of the lines breaking and falling down to rest in a puddle, which now also contained the severed head. The electrical charge was, apparently, causing the head to bounce and sizzle in a very disconcerting fashion, to put it lightly. Not completely what OP is looking for, but a horrible scene nonetheless. My grandfather's friend was a truck driver for many years, and on one night while he was driving, a car swerved across the median and hit his truck head on, killed everyone inside the car, and to make it worse, they had just crossed into America legally, so this small sedan had about 6 more people than it should have held stuffed into hollowed out places. So when he hit the car, a red mist just exploded out. He had people stuck up under the hood of his truck and it was a huge mess. Fricked him up for a while. Probably fricked up any responding officers too. I had an old co-worker who used to drive the 18-wheeler for our company and had a man commit suicide by walking out in front of his truck. He could no longer drive or ride in a vehicle after that, would ride his bike or walk to work. I hope your grandfather's friend ended up being somewhat okay after. I'm sure it's hard to come back from that. I once went to a scene where her ex-boyfriend showed up at the house where the girl lived. He knocked and then started firing a shotgun through the door, hitting a toddler. He then went in and shot the girl's mother. I still remember chunks of flesh and underarm hair stuck to the wall. Shot the father and then left. The girl was out for the evening. He then left the gun and a suicide knot at the top of a bridge. He went on the run instead of killing himself and was captured shortly thereafter by the marshals. Fricked up scene. My father-in-law is a retired state trooper. He was called to respond to the 2-vehicle accident near his home. That's where he spent his final minutes with his wife before she died trapped in her vehicle. A bunch come to mind. Hard to rank them because they are all so unique. One was a 95-year-old lady who lived alone and stopped answering phone calls from her son. He went to her house and found her about a week later. She died while in the bathtub. Her head was resting on the edge of the tub, looking up, with her mouth extremely wide open. She had hundreds of bugs pouring out of her eyes, nose and mouth. It was straight out of a horror movie. You could smell it from the front porch. I felt really bad for her son. No one should ever have to see their mother like that. Posting on the behalf of my friend sitting next to me. Worst crime scene I've been to was 6-month-old baby being thrown out a 6-story window because the mother believed she was possessed by the devil. This is a story I got from the local police lieutenant during an interview for a college paper. It was Halloween night, and my campus has a somewhat notorious Halloween party throughout town. Police actually walk the streets in riot gear that night, and normally get a lot of nice costumes. Dudes. Anyway, they get a call to break up a fight at a house party. They arrive and are trying to push through all the drunk people to find who's actually fighting. They got to the fight, which was actually taking place the next house over on the sidewalk, but a second too late. They watched as one kid pushed the other in front of a speeding tow truck, basically causing this kid's body to explode into a bloody mess. I think the kid who pushed him got involuntary manslaughter or something like that. Attended scene autopsy of a 13-year-old who was hunting with his 11-year-old brother and accidentally shot him dead center in the back of the head with a slug meant for deer. The kid looked bad enough when I got there and had already expired. His face looked like a facehugger if you want context. Feel really bad for the brother as he attempted to do CPR and stuff. Obviously in a panic as his brother was likely just expelling blood everywhere and not actually still alive. This poor kid will not only remember shooting his little brother but actually seeing the aftermath and putting his face on it. Obviously far worse for the kid than anyone else. This one's a bit of a cliché, and not really a crime scene. Few months old DOA. Elderly women with no family, just 2 dogs. Family out of state asked for us to check on her. Got into her apartment. She had been dead a few months. Other than the smell, the sight of her eaten off fingers by the starving dogs that were there. I'm going to guess you mean a cliché. A clique is a group of people. Tragic. Though, old folks living alone seems to not be a good idea. Cop friend of mine was first on the scene to the monkey ripping that woman's face off in CT. He had serious PTSD after that. I work at a police department reviewing old cases. I'd say the worst I've ever come across, so far, was an older man who was found dead in his home by his son. Doesn't sound too bad at first, until you realize that he was found kneeling next to his bed, pants around his knees, Playboy on the bed in front of him, and dong still in his hand. Dead 2 days and found by his son mid-fap. Actually you would be amazed by how many corpses are found photographed partially or fully naked. A lot of them are found in the bathroom with their pants down, collapsed onto the floor with poop in the toilet on the floor on the person. I'd say 80% of our untimelies are found partially naked with poop somewhere nearby. Currently just a volunteer, but hoping to hold the official title and role soon. A few months back there was a call out to someone who had jumped in front of a train. Fairly certain it was done purposefully, but no one knows for sure, and I haven't followed up on it. Lady had her legs severed, and her stomach area was caved inwards, sort of like in those cartoons where their stomachs are flat against the road after being run over, but with more intestines and stuff that had burst out of various exit points from the pressure. Was given the option to go home for the day after that, but decided to stay. Some guy later in the day called us good for nothing pigs, which made me realize how quick people are to judge us without even knowing what we do or have to deal with. Was very new to it at this point. Not a good day. Not Me by my police trade school teacher told me a story of such a fricked up crime scene he was a part of. There was this beautiful woman, could have been a model, and she was naked in the floor of her hotel room, her head not attached to her body and blood everywhere. The entire hotel was a crime scene and my teacher kept seeing cops sneak in to see the hot dead chick, and my teacher, who had command, was furious. He kicked them all out and tried to do his job. Until his higher up, I think a lieutenant, came in by asking around. I heard the hot headless chick was here. Since he was a higher rank, the second he stepped in he took command of the scene, and my teacher never did find out what happened, except some cops care about seeing a hot corpse than doing their job. I'm pretty sure being headless takes a corpse from hot to not. The Icicle Man. Outside of smaller city in Idaho, Hop, 27K, is a kind of shanty town affectionately known as Welfare. The only business is a little convenience store a lady runs out of her house. Welfare. It has at least a 90% unemployment rate. Anyways, it's the dead of winter and around -20 degrees F. Get a call about a missing persons. A man of 70 hasn't been seen or heard from in over a month. Get to his trailer home and come across the following scene. Man's gas had been shut off due to lack of payment, but electricity was still on. Man had waterbed with an electric heater to warm the water. Looks like man had been stabbed on the bed. He rotted down to essentially a soup-like consistency. His liquefied remains had dribbled off the edge of the heated waterbed to form intricate icicles off the edge. The Icicle Man was the absolute worst. My dad used to work He told me about how they figured out the cartels used to use stillborns and orphans to traffic drugs. They would kill the kids and preserve them so that they could stitch C&H inside their bodies. They would hand the stuffed kids off to a girl that looked like a mom, and they would pretend their kid was sleeping when they were crossing a border. Went on for years until a drug dog attacked one of the stuffed infants and sea snowed everywhere. I was on vacation in Tokyo a long time ago. Strolling through the streets one day, I came to a train crossing and several pedestrians stopped as the train approached. One guy, a mid-50s salaryman in a cheap suit, turned to me, put his finger over his lips and said SHHHHHHHHHH, then jumped in front of the train. It happened so fast I couldn't tell what happened. It was like he was there, looking me in the eyes. Then he took a step back and was replaced by a train. Still shakes me to this day, even though I have no idea what happened or why. There was something casual about it. He wasn't totally insane or disheveled. He looked like a guy on his way home from work. Obligatory, not a cop, but one of the deputies in the county I grew up in was the first on scene at the fatal one-car accident where his only daughter was the driver. Not a cop, but I work in a police station in a civilian position. One of the worst described to me by a co-worker was early in her career. A group of boys, probably around 12, were playing in an empty lot. They had a jerry can of propane and were dipping a stick with a rag wrapped around it into the can, then lighting it on fire. Anyways, one of the boys managed to get some of the propane on his shoe and lit his shoe on fire. He bent down to pat the fire on his shoe out, and one of his friends thought it would be funny to toss the rest of the jerry can onto his friend. The fire traveled up from his shoe and the boy was engulfed in seconds. My colleague arrived only minutes later, but it was too late. She was ordered to remain with him until he arrived at the hospital and to stay with him until the coroner arrived, because though he was still alive when she arrived, it was clear that he wasn't going to make it, and she needed to do continuity on the body. She said when they performed the autopsy, the only part of his body that hadn't sustained second or third degree burns were the bottoms of his feet. My colleague says the hardest this she has ever done was traveling to the hospital with him and listen to him beg to see his parents again, as they both knew he was going to die. I'm not a cop, but I accidentally ran into a crime scene once. My neighbors down the street had always been pretty strange. It was some super aloof grandparents, their seriously messed up daughter who is rarely around, and their daughter's daughter about 3 years younger than me who I always babysat, for free usually because they were pretty poor. Anyway, one day me and the girl are coming home from school. She's probably 9 and I was around 12. Her mom is bipolar with psychosis, probably on the schizoaffective end, and has been dating around with guys not much better. I leave for my house and she walks into this apartment, and then a minute later there's a gunshot. Everyone around starts going for the complex, including my parents, to investigate, and me following along a few minutes after. I got a small glimpse. There was a ton of chaos. The police had been called. The girl is screaming from inside the apartment. My parents are trying to block me from seeing of blood and brains all over the wall. I found out later that apparently her mom's boyfriend was waiting at the table with a handgun and blew his brains out when she walked in front of her and her mom. I saw her like once after that, but the kid was totally messed up from abuse and the trauma. I don't envy the officers who had to talk to them and check out the scene. My dad was a copper in Manchester, UK, so he and his probationer partner, probationer means an officer being trained, get a call to a missing and concerned for welfare in an old people's gated community. It's July, and pretty warm. The old guy hadn't been seen for about 5 weeks. My dad kicks the door into the house and is hit by what he calls a wall of rotting corpse smell. The probationer officer asks to go in, and my dad says it's not something you need to see at this stage in your training. Ignoring his advice, she walks in and instantly throws up. The corpse has turned black, tongue swollen, all this crap. The coroner comes round and they start to lift the body off of the bed. Upon lifting the corpse, the back skin falls off and the kidneys drop out onto the bed. My dad threw up on the body and the coroner apparently laughs. Of 9 years of service, that was the worst thing he ever saw. When my father was a rookie, almost 60 years ago, he was called to a trailer park by concerned neighbors. It was winter and a poor family had tried to heat their trailer with a kitchen oven. The snow from the roof melted, iced over the windows and effectively sealed it. When my father and his partner forced the door, they found the bodies of young children and the father. The mother was no longer rational from the effects of CO2. She was on her hands and knees in the kitchen, trying to scrub the vomit of her dead children off the floor with their bodies scattered around her. Pop saw World War II from Normandy Beach to Berlin. I asked him what was the worst thing he had seen while in uniform. I was not expecting a story about a NJ trailer park. My anatomy professor worked in ANA for a while. I'm not sure in what capacity. He wasn't a medical doctor or nurse. But one morning he was working and this guy walks in, torn clothes and covered in dirt and blood, with his shirt full of something squidgy and leaves, holding the edges to keep everything contained. Like when little kids use shirts to carry Legos. The guy drove himself to the hospital, but he is disoriented and isn't making any sense. But they quickly realize his intestines are in his shirt. Well, partly in his shirt and partly in him. They get him in surgery and clean up what they can, stuffing it back in, but some of it gets removed because it's too damaged or dirty or whatever. Turns out he was out hunting early in the morning by himself. He had climbed a tree to get to a hunting platform or something. I don't remember what it was called and I don't hunt. Sorry. The steps up to the platform were mounted into the tree. Not a ladder, but sort of metal L shapes designed to hold a foot and keep it from slipping off. Except at some point he did slip off, and he caught himself on the hook step with his belly. He hit the ground, lay there for a bit, and then realized his insides were trying to be outsides. So he scooped them up as best he could and made his way to his car, where he drove himself to the air. Not sure if it was the worst, but definitely the most gratifying once I found out the details as to what happened. Went to a house for a call of a dog loose. Upon entering the house, it looked like a slasher film. Blood smeared all over the walls. Looks like large arterial squirts all over the place on the ceiling, etc. The homeowner had towels wrapped around his leg and arms and was at the point of passing out. All the while a happy pit bull covered in blood was outside looking at me, wagging his tail. Got the guy medical attention and retrieved the dog. Turns out the homeowner was beating his dog trying to get it to become fight worthy. Dog turned around and made the homeowner his bee. Sad that the dog was put down. Dog seemed like it could have been a great dog if it was given a proper chance in a loving home. My stepdad was a lieutenant detective in our Midwestern town of about 25,000 people. He was in charge of this case where a serial killer stopped on his way through down to tie up, violate and gut a 16-year-old girl in her own bed after school. My stepdad stayed in the bedroom with her body through all the forensics and evidence collection. He had teenage kids of his own at the time. The killer went on to Florida to do the same thing to a 14-year-old girl. This was in the 80s, so it took some time before they were able to connect the two cases. Eventually the killer was caught after shooting a police officer in Texas. He was given the death penalty. This was the biggest case of my stepdad's life. He has stayed in touch with the girl's family over the last 30 years. Just a few months ago the case was on one of those criminal investigation shows where they interviewed my stepdad. He went back to the police station. He's been retired for 20 years and had to go through all the old documents and photos. Even after all this time, he still came home teary-eyed and exhausted. My dad told me about a scene he had to go out to once. This guy lives with his wife and her mother-in-law and his son. The husband and wife were into prescription pills and had a bad habit. One day the mother went to pick the son from school and the father and his mill got into it. He grabbed his rifle, shot her, then went outside into the woods into a stand with a clear view of the house. He called his wife and told her what he did. When the wife pulled up, she ran inside and then ran back out. She must have seen her husband from afar and told her son to get down. As soon as she did, her husband took the top of her head off, walked up to the car and fired a couple more rounds into it. He then shot himself in the head and the son witnessed it all. Years back my criminal justice professor told me the worst two he's been to. A guy had been pinned in between the platform and a train after accidentally slipping. They had to call the family to the scene because the only thing holding him together was the train. Once the train was moved he would die. He had to watch them say their goodbyes. Then there was an escalator incident where a little girl's arm was sucked into the escalator halfway. He said the screams alone were horrifying, and then when they removed her from the escalator she had no meat left on the bone below the elbow. Ugh, the train is horrible, but I think it's the escalator that gets me. This just confirms my fear of escalators isn't that irrational. My husband is an MP. Some parents came home with their baby in the car seat and decided the best place to put the baby in the car seat is on the stove. When they walked by, the stove turned on and the car seat caught in fire. They didn't know till the baby was screaming. When my husband got there, the car seat was an unrecognizable melted plastic blob in the middle of the road. Another time a teenage son beat a mother with a curtain shower rod with the curtain still attached. Then he locked her in a dog cage. My criminal justice professor told me this one. His co-worker followed a man who was suspected of kidnapping a little boy into his home. The co-worker makes his way into the man's bedroom where he finds him fricking the said little boy with a gun pointed at the back of his head. The man looks at the officer and grins as he pulls the trigger, killing the little boy. Only solace I took in it was that the officer shot him almost immediately after. Not a cop, but saw a helmet with the visor closed on the highway, perfectly sitting on the road. 100 meters after the helmet is a motorcycle. Another 50 meters down the road lies the rest of the body completely intact except for the head. I thought WTF, no head. How turns out the motorcycle driver crashed in such a way that his head got stuck between two steel lines on the side of the road and it came right off his shoulders. His head was still in the helmet. I had looked at the helmet for a good 15 seconds thinking whether I should pick it up at first. I had no idea that his head was still in there, so glad I didn't. I haven't driven anything with two wheels at high speeds after that. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.